like tipping over once they're
That's
done.
what I'm saying. So maybe that's why we have
destabilizing
so much
the forest.
blowdown because of all the tree hugging, tree leaning poopers. They are actually ruining the root systems of the trees.
I would love to be able to do that for the sake of my legs, but I usually am doing the break dance. They always are like the break dancer, and I'm like, that's the only one. Yeah. Unless they're bringing their own tree. Oh. We wanna chase the night, wanna dance to the light, pull the stars from the sky. Hi, I'm Carrie.
And I'm Molly.
And you're listening to the Two Sisters on Adventures podcast. Our final day on the Timberline Trail, day 3.
Yeah.
So we woke up at our beautiful sinkhole campsite that morning, and I feel like we got up reasonably early. Maybe not.
For us, I suppose.
We only had 13 miles to go that day, so I don't think that we were feeling like too pressured.
But I think we also knew it was supposed to be fairly warm. Mm-hmm. In Oregon in August of this,
which this was the first day of August.
Yeah, it was the first day of August, but there was a hot streak in there. So we knew that it was supposed to get warm. So we knew, okay, we have a day of uphill. We don't want to be doing that in the heat of the day. Mm-hmm. So I think that was our main priority as far as getting ready sooner.
Also, we definitely wanted to get to the Sandy relatively early in the day. Right, with our counterclockwise setup, we were set up to be pretty close to both the Elliott and the Sandy early in the morning, just to make those major river/creek crossings a little bit easier on us.
And we had posted something a couple weeks ago about how the Sandy River was not as challenging as we expected it to be. And someone reached out to us and, wanted to clarify, people have died in the Sandy before. It's not a river to
take lightly.
Exactly. And our whole point was just, it depends on the time of day. It depends on the time of year. For us specifically, like Carrie mentioned, we were going to prioritize it. Crossing it earlier in the day, we were only a couple miles from it where we camped, and that could lead us into maybe a little less stressful crossing of the Sandy.
And the actual point of that video had been to say, don't underestimate any of the crossings, because everything I had found had said that Coe Creek or the Coe branch of the Elliott was just going to be a very simple crossing, no big deal. It was the lowest on the list. They just stepped across. And for us, the time of day that we got to it, it actually was a pretty major crossing. It was something we had to stop and think seriously about. It is upstream from a waterfall, so your runout's not that great. And so really my point of the video was to say more like you can read all these things about what's going to be the worst and what's going to be the best, but you can't really depend on them because it's going to be situational for you. Mm-hmm. And also, you don't have to fear river crossings necessarily, because people hype stuff up all the time. Oh, this one's the worst. This one's so dangerous. And it's like, well, it might be, or maybe you'll get there in the morning and it won't be so bad, and it won't be after a major rainstorm. So it's just kind of one of those things where it's like, it's so situational, and I guess...
We talked about this in our John Muir Trail series, and I don't think we've touched on it in our recent episodes, but just the concept of you can appreciate the opinion that someone gives you or their feedback on an element of the trail, but then you always have to take it with a grain of salt because you don't know their experience. Mm-hmm. You don't know how long they've been doing this, the conditions that they were in, and sometimes if you just let that really get in your head, it can either ruin your trip or prevent you from going out entirely. So we've talked about how it's important to do your homework, to research and understand conditions, but then you just also have to be able to get out there and then make decisions when you're there, because someone else had a terrible experience or found it really challenging doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be the case for you. You gotta do your research.
And I do think my other thing too is we did a trail of several years back when we were really getting into backpacking, and I was so nervous for it. We car camped the night before we went, and I didn't sleep that whole night because I was just so anxious about the trail. And then we went and we did it, and it was really fun and beautiful and amazing. It was very committing because we were actually going to be shuttled 90 miles from our car and have basically no exit points. So it was like when we started that trail, we had to finish it. There was basically no bailout options. And so I think I was so anxious from that I kind of had to assess myself afterwards and say, okay, either you can't do trails like that, or you just have to find a different way to deal with it, where you don't let yourself get so anxious and in your head, because honestly, you've researched it, you know what it's going to be like. And yes, there are always things where you can't tell how it's going to go, But if you're just going to let that like make it so you can't sleep for a whole night before, which also, I mean, had something to do with the fact that I was working nights at the time, blah, blah, blah. But it's like you have to also assess yourself mentally and say, okay, like I was like, well, Carrie, you're either not going to do anything like that ever again, or you're going to figure out a different way to deal with it, because that can't just be your life.
Seems like you figured out a different way to deal
Yeah,
with
apparently
it.
I did. Buy my online course. Just kidding.
Yeah.
I don't have one. Okay.
But yeah, so that being said, we wanted to prioritize an earlier departure so that we could cross the Sandy in better conditions, etc. So yeah, we got up with Kate and Drew. We made breakfast together. I feel like we just had a nice kind of goofy, relaxed morning in camp. Yeah. We already had PCT through hikers strolling past us.
Naturally.
Yeah, and so kind of same story as the days prior. Kate and Drew were ready to hit the trail well before Carrie and I. Yep. Maybe we should learn something from them on how to get ready.
We had decided the night before, hey, why don't you guys get going ahead of us, and we'll just start afterwards and catch up to you, because they had a slightly slower pace and we were pretty fast. So it's like, well, why wait for us when you guys can just get up and at them? And they did. And honestly, I would say that Molly and I were probably also slowed by the fact that we had to use the bathroom like 3 times that morning, which the ground
person.
was, which the ground was great for digging a cat hole, but also like it still slows you down. And here I just want to ask a question. So I get sent a ton of videos about pooping in the wilderness, and I love it. I like that I'm the pooping in the wilderness lady.
But are you saying that people
like
are sending these to you, or are you being targeted by the videos?
No, I get messaged them. I get messaged videos about different styles of pooping. I have a whole selection of people who send them to me. I love it. I'm not asking anyone to stop. But here's my thing. These videos are always like, here's the different pooping styles. And like 2/3 of those involve a tree, like leaning against a tree, hugging a tree, holding onto a tree branch. And I just want to know, what are these people doing for their cat holes? Because the first time I pooped outside, I was like, I'm going to be the person who is hugging the tree or like crouching by the tree so that I don't have to use my leg muscles. But for some reason, I don't understand how these people are digging cat holes. Are they bringing like a jackhammer with them? Because if you try to dig a cat hole anywhere near a tree, oh, look, a root. Okay, now I gotta go to a different spot. Look, more roots. It's like you can only dig a 1-inch cat hole.
I know. And then you find the spot in between the roots and you dig down. Yeah. And then when you say you've made it 3 inches deep. Yeah, you made a little
progress.
Oh, and now there's a root in between the other roots that you were in between. Yeah.
And so I'm just like, are these people not using their cat holes properly?
Okay, so maybe they're using a really intense shovel and they are breaking the roots off and they're digging their shaka.
The trees are like tipping over once they're done.
That's what I'm saying. So maybe that's why we have so
much
the
forest
blowdown, because of all the tree hugging, tree leaning poopers. They are actually ruining the root systems
I
of the trees.
I would love to be able to do that for the sake of my legs, but I usually am doing the break dance. They always are like the break dancer, and I'm like, that's the only one. Yeah. Unless they're bringing their own tree.
Oh, I don't know.
And they're like rooting it.
I suppose you could build like a trekking pole kind of reinforcement. Yeah. But that sounds like too much work. So
that's my one problem is I feel, the other thing in the videos is always the people, like the 2 friends holding hands.
That's a joke,
and I'm like, well, that one actually would work though. Because there's no tree involved.
One time, Carrie and I were digging our night cat holes, and then we both had to go fairly close proximity to each other. And then I was like, you know what?
I'm traumatized.
I don't want to do this. I'll go over there and wait until you're done. So the team pooping, I don't think I would ever be able to do that.
That's too graphic of a story. I'm gonna have to list this under adults only.
Oh gosh. Oh no.
Too much of a pooping story.
Exactly.
Anyway. So that was my little segue rage rant. I don't understand again how these people are doing that, but it makes for a good video, and I enjoy getting my inbox filled with videos of different styles of ways you can poop in the forest.
So I think it was about an hour after Kate and Drew departed from camp that we actually left. We figured out that we'd probably catch them, a ways down the trail, and we started out. And so...
And Ramona Falls was going to be, like, our first big stop of the day. But that is, like, funny because, it's all uphill from there, in essence, because Ramona Falls is the lowest spot on trail.
Well, and we were even lower because we were on the PCT at Muddy Fork, so we were on the lowest spot on trail at our campsite. So,
but it was still a very chill, I really enjoyed the hike.
When we hiked up to Ramona, it was the cool of the morning. It was really fun to just see there are cliffs, I guess, that surround the trail up towards Ramona Falls. So looking at the cliffs, looking at the river that's flowing along the trail. And then it was just a really nice grade. I want to say we gained like 300 feet in the first mile. So it was like one of those grades where it's like, oh, I'm just getting warmed up, getting started with my day. And then I think Ramona Falls was like 2.5 miles from where we camped.
Yeah. So it was like, oh, we'll have a nice little warm up. And there was there was water where we camped, but we would have to walk backwards. And actually, no, because it was glacial water. It was like literally it looks muddy because there's so much silt in it. So we had to fill up our first like water of the day down there. So yeah, we made it to Ramona Falls, but then it was just kind of funny because it's this beautiful area. Right. And I was so looking forward to it. We lived in Oregon for like 4 years, Molly like almost 5, and I had never been to Ramona Falls. And it's so beautiful. And I'm just like, yay, everything's so pretty. And I just had like the most aggressive gagging attack all of a sudden when I was there. So it's like I'm at Ramona Falls, and I'm like, and I was just I could not stop gagging. I thought I was gonna throw up at Ramona Falls, and I'm just like, what the heck is this? It's like,
and I had a nice time. I thought it was very pretty. I sat there, enjoyed it, ate some gummies,
I'm just gagging and gagging,
some fruit snacks rather,
gagging and gagging.
I was just like, Carrie, what is your deal? But it's fine. She worked through it. And,
I mean, I had some water. And
when we were at Ramona Falls, it's chilly because it's shaded, and then there's the mist from the waterfall. And Carrie was like, you know what? I bet Kate and Drew were here for less than like 15 minutes.
Because it's cold.
Because it's cold. And we stayed there for quite a while.
Yeah, because I had to gag.
To the point where it felt very nice to leave. Yeah.
But anyway, so that was kind of an enjoyable moment at the waterfalls, but also kind of weird from the gagging.
So we made our way from Ramona Falls, and right by Ramona Falls, there's one junction in the trail. And when we had sent Kate and Drew off for the morning, an hour ahead of us, we said, there's like no junctions. You just keep walking straight. And when we got to Ramona Falls and I saw the junction, I was like, oh no,
can I interject? In hindsight, we should have had them also download the map on their phone.
It was not.
That was a bad move on our part. I think I just assumed we'd hike together the whole time. Yeah. But in the future, if I did this again, I would make sure everybody had the map on their phone.
Yeah.
Anyway,
and
go
was
ahead.
a little more oriented.
Yeah.
They were oriented to the general
trail. And it was totally
trail.
fine. But I just am like, I don't know why I didn't just have them download a map as well.
Yeah. So there was this one section where I think it would go to the Muddy Fork area of the Timberline Trail.
Mm-hmm. The area we skipped because of all the blowdown.
It almost felt like the trail was going straight in that direction, not towards Ramona. So then I did have to deal with this crippling fear for the next several hours because we didn't know where Kate and Drew were. We had no way to communicate with them. We had an inReach. They did not. And we could only just hope that they picked the correct turn and didn't go straight-ish like we told them to.
Yeah.
So, another element of interesting.
Yeah, and it was funny because I think we just thought we would catch up with them so soon, but like they didn't really stop that morning. Yeah. And so it took us quite a while, which I was very proud of them also that it took us so long to catch up with them. But it was also like, oh, oopsies.
Exactly.
Anyway.
We continued on our way. The day was getting a little bit warmer. The forest kind of started to open up a bit and we could hear a sound of rushing water. So that tells us that we're getting close to the Sandy. So we kind of made our way into, it's interesting with those creeks and rivers that flow from volcanoes is you have the area where the water is running, but then you have a pretty wide area where it's just like river rock and kind of sand. And I don't know if it's because of how once again, if it's from the glacier initially, probably. I don't think there's like avalanches that flow along those routes.
No, but the river can be as wide as that whole thing at certain times. Like there are pictures of when they've had really massive flooding. And, you know, like the bridges, like just covered with all the, like actual road bridges covered with all the rocks that the rivers have taken down. So it's that wide because I think at times it is that wide. Totally. But probably not typically times where people are out hiking.
And so then I believe there were some cairns and then there were other people crossing as well. So we could look at that. Yep. But it's kind of interesting because you know you can cross over one section, but it's such a wide area once again. Like it was probably a good 100 yards from where we were standing to where the forest resumed. So you know you're going to cross at one point, but you don't know how many like sections of river you're going to cross. You don't know how braided out it is. So I think, did we see someone crossing right when we first got there? Or
I think so. I think we saw somebody who had just crossed. I don't think we saw where they had crossed, but they had just crossed.
And we saw a gal.
Yeah.
Did she have a dog? Yeah. So she was heading pretty far upriver.
She was trying to find a good spot for her dog.
Exactly. So we kind of analyzed, we walked along up and down. We probably went a good 1/10 of a mile or maybe 2/10 of a mile upstream. And what we were looking for was just an area where the water wasn't flowing so turbulently. So we were looking for an area where we felt like it would be a crossing that wouldn't involve a lot of stepping on any rocks that were underwater.
Yeah.
So,
and honestly, it was flowing pretty good. It was 10:30 in the morning when we got there, and it was only about shin height, but you still want to be careful what you pick to walk on.
Exactly. So I think we at first found one section that we thought we were going to do, and then we decided to walk maybe a little bit further upstream and found an area where the water, it didn't look like there's really any rocks we were going to have to stand on. So did you go over first or did I?
Yeah, I think I finally just was like, you know what? Every spot looks as good as the last spot to me. We're going to get our feet wet today.
Yeah.
We did switch into our water shoes just because, honestly, I think the first thing I was looking for was a rock hop because I just was not in the mood to switch my shoes. But we couldn't find a rock hop, and I think we finally just said, you know what? Any place looks pretty much as good as the next. It's all flowing about the same amount of it's got the same rate, it looks like, refresh rate as you go along. So we just kind of picked a spot where we could tell that it wasn't very deep and where it was, there wasn't like any random waterfall or anything that looked super weird on either side. And then I just went across, and honestly, it was a great crossing. Yeah, you had to watch your footing and all that kind of stuff, but I felt very confident and very comfortable with where we picked. And we've done we've done enough creek crossings that are similar to the Sandy that I felt very comfortable in it. I think there were some people who felt pretty anxious, like the people who had just crossed it. I think they were kind of like, oh, be careful, like da 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 da. And they had crossed at a different point than we chose to cross, and I don't know that I would have crossed at their crossing point because I think they told us which one, and we were kind of like, we're not into it.
There was a cairn right where the trail spit you out, and we looked at it and we decided we didn't like it.
It just wasn't really our thing.
That's why we headed up the river.
And so for me, I felt really good about that crossing. It was pretty simple once you got to the right spot.
There was this one little section where the sand got a little bit soft, and then it was a little deeper, and it wasn't stressful because the flow, it wasn't hard in that spot. But then when you got out of the water, your feet were sandy. So then you had to go back down to rinse it off before you put your shoes on. And before we did that, I wanted to know if we were going to have to get our feet wet again. So I actually took off heading across kind of the sandy open area because I could hear more water. And so it was weird because there was another channel, but we didn't have to cross it to get back to the Timberline Trail in the forest. So then I had to walk all the way back to the Sandy, rinse my feet off so I could then put my shoes on, and then we could start the real, more substantial uphill portion of our day.
Yep. I feel like it was at this point that we started seeing a lot of PCT hikers. And I think that's just because as you get close to the Timberline Lodge, a lot of people stay the night there. So you're seeing a lot of people who had just started out in the morning. And then actually, as we got closer to afternoon, we'd see more people who had just chosen to start in the afternoon. But it was I don't know, I'd see 1 in every 5 or more people that you saw would be PCT hikers.
And at one point it seemed like it was 80%.
Yeah, actually a lot of them. And honestly, we'd been out there for enough days by this point, and most people don't go counterclockwise, that a lot of PCT hikers would be like, oh, you're doing the PCT? And we'd just be like, nope.
But it's always fun to see them.
And always an honor if they think that you look dirty enough to be one of them.
Yeah, I think what they do is just incredible.
Yeah.
And after we crossed the Sandy, we hit a real uphill. I think we had, it was probably a good 800 feet per mile for a little while.
It didn't feel terrible though to me. And the first part was in the forest, which was nice.
Yeah. And what I was thinking of is when we first started going uphill, I mentally was like, oh, okay, time to get into my uphill gear and kind of just grind it out. And so we had a nice pace and it felt good, but it did feel like we were working. It didn't feel like we were walking downhill. And so at one point there was this kid that we started leapfrogging with. And he had just started hiking the PCT from Cascade Locks, I think. So.
Which is such a bummer to start there because it's all uphill to Timberline, basically. You go from the lowest point on the Pacific Crest Trail up to Timberline. And so I feel like he was a little kind of just bummed out seeming, but I think it was because he hadn't really met anybody yet. And he was wearing Vans. He just seemed so cool.
I think it was his second day, so he hadn't been out too long, but
he'd been making
I think he had a chunk of 45 days that he could hike, and so he was just going to see how far he went. And
I was like, good for you.
We leapfrogged with him a little bit. And then at this point, we were about 6 miles into our day, And I had done the maths and determined that based on our typical hiking speed and Kate and Drew's, that we probably would catch them right around 6 miles, if not a little sooner. And
we had kept asking people, hey, did you see 2 people up ahead of us wearing, clothes similar to this description? And they'd be like, nope, didn't see them. And we'd be just like,
I started to feel a little bit of a sense of dread.
Yeah.
Because we probably asked 3 different groups and
none of them had seen them.
Nope, haven't seen them.
Yeah.
And then we hit the 6 mile mark and we still hadn't seen Kate and Drew. And I was like, oh gosh, like the only thing we can really do is keep going. And then worst case scenario, we figure things out later. But then fortunately, right around, I think it was like the 6.5 mile mark, there were Kate and Drew. Mm-hmm. And so we were super proud of them because we thought maybe that they would have, hung out at the Sandy and we would have crossed together if that was what they were wanting to do. But they felt confident to just go for the crossing. Mm-hmm. And they really had just crushed, half the day.
Our little birds had spread their wings and flown.
Exactly, on their first backpacking trip. So it was fun to reunite with them and chat a little bit. And then at this point, I think we were only a couple miles from the junction to Paradise Park. So we had a decision to make if we wanted to stay on the Timberline Trail or if we wanted to do the alternate.
Yeah, and for the Paradise Park, the Paradise Park alternate, it really does not add that much distance. It adds like the tiniest bit of elevation either way that you go, because you have to go a little bit up and into the mountain. Basically, it's kind of like a triangle, basically, where you can either take the hypotenuse, which would be the shortest way, and that's the trail, or you can do Paradise Park. But I always wanted to see Paradise Park. Molly and I had tried to go see it years earlier, which would be the time when I ripped the hole in my shoe and all the ants were there and all that kind of stuff. And so we kind of just decided, you know what? This is going to be our time to see it. It doesn't add that much. We asked Kate and Drew if they were fine with it, and they're like, yeah, absolutely. We're already out here. We may as well see it. And so we decided that we would.
And I'd convinced myself because the Timberline Trail, there's this one area where it kind of descended and ascended at the same distance points as if you were on the alternate. So I convinced myself that if we increased elevation to get to Paradise Park, we'd still kind of like, it would all be a wash in the end, and it really didn't add much. So that was nice because it was a highlight of the day.
I would say it did add a lot in terms of morale and just fun and beauty. Yeah. You're right. You feel like you're right up on the mountain. There were wildflowers at the time, probably not as many as there are, a little bit earlier. But I was so glad we did it. And we did meet a guy later, and we tried to convince him. He was a PCT hiker, and we were like, yeah, it's so worth it. He asked us how it was, and we were like, it's so worth it. You should definitely do it. And he was like, it'll add like 200 feet of gain, so I'm not going to do it. And I do understand that, but I'm also like, how sad to go all those miles and miss such a beautiful spot.
It really is nice.
Because it's honestly worth your while.
The one comment, the people that we met when we first were coming up to Paradise Park told us that there was no shade like the entire time we were up there. And we were up there like middle of the day. It was like noon. So that is just one point where I think, did we grab a short rest break in a tree?
Yeah, we didn't linger. Well, I think that was after we were through the park. Basically, we kind of just enjoyed the views. We took it slow for sure. Yeah. There was a patch of snow. Molly was making a snow angel.
It was so
throwing
fun.
Snowballs. Yeah. But we just kind of enjoyed the views and made our little trek through the park.
Yeah.
Quote unquote.
And at one point, right when we were first entering the park, maybe someone can help us with this. There's this sound that you'll hear in the forests in Oregon. I don't remember hearing it anywhere else, but we've heard it a lot in the Mount Jefferson Wilderness. And it's like when you're totally still, it's like this a whoomp, a whoomp, a whoomp, a whoomp kind of sound. And I don't know. We can't figure out what it was.
It's like the wind in the rocks or a bird.
But yeah, it's like we heard it. So we kept like pausing to listen for it, and everyone could hear it, but no one knew what it was.
I wonder if we recorded sound of it.
I think we did. We'll have to find it. Maybe someone can help us. But it's just one of those sounds that we'd hear in the forest, and we've heard it, I would say, like 10 times in different places. Yeah. But unsure of what creates the sound.
But anyway, it was just so cool up there to see all of that stuff, and everyone that we met was so happy because it was a beautiful, perfect day. Like, I would take exposed, hot, and sunny over not having any views of the mountain for that area.
And there are quite a few nice spots that you can pitch a tent as well. And there were a couple people who were camping up there.
And there were a couple teeny tiny water sources. Yeah. But as we kind of were towards the exit of the park, we did find a really nice little stream. So we collected water, and we said, we don't really want to sit in the open sun for our rest break. So we made it to basically like the edge of Paradise Park, and there was this little cluster of trees next to the trail. So we sat on this very slanty, tiny hill, And it's funny because this is actually the first time Kate and Drew tried tuna. Remember?
Oh, really?
They were like, yeah, because the first day they had their sub, the second day they had their trail pizza, and the third day they were going to finally try their tuna. And I think their vote was towards like, it's not actually the worst thing you could ever eat, but it's not the best. And that is totally
Pretty
fair.
much
And
accurate,
basically
yeah.
what I would say eating tuna on a tortilla for lunch is.
Yeah. Paradise Park, though, it was really magical. And I would say if you are doing the Timberline Trail,
Or even the PCT.
100% do the alternate route. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Even the trail hiking down from Paradise Park was really, really scenic. We kept getting peekaboo views of Mount Hood. There was a couple more wildflower meadows. It was just really nice.
Okay, can I just say,
Yeah.
this one thing that's funny about Paradise Park is there's like no private area to
That's
use
true.
the bathroom.
That's true.
Plus, like some of the more private seeming areas, there's so many bees because of all the flowers. And so I remember I kind of needed to pee. And so we were like, oh, Kate and Drew, you go on ahead. And then we kept being like, oh, but there's still all these people here and nowhere to use the bathroom. But we did find a spot. Anyway, that was just something that was kind of, I guess, the downside of Paradise Park.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Is there's no public restroom areas.
But we still recommend it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we're descending, and then I guess I hadn't realized that we had one final water crossing. It was the Zigzag River. So at this point, we had to descend a good 800 feet from Paradise Park to cross the Zigzag River, and then we were going to have to ascend again, obviously, back up to Timberline Lodge. But yeah, it was just a really scenic descent, once again, catching beautiful glimpses of Mount Hood. And then we got to the Zigzag River, and it took a good, minute or two to kind of figure out what we wanted to do to cross it. And there was a gal, I think, on the other side of the river who was a PCT hiker, and I was interested by that because she had pitched her tent kind of like right near the river. And I don't know if she was just taking an afternoon rest break, but it was in full sun.
Yeah.
And
I feel like
one
your
of
tent
my
would get so hot.
least favorite things is being in a tent in full sun in the middle of the day. That is a warm environment.
Yeah.
So, not really sure what her plan was there, but we saw her, and then I was realizing, oh, we actually have to go quite a bit uphill now.
Yeah.
However, on this trail, you are going to go uphill at the end, no matter which way you cut it. And I do feel like uphill from the zigzag was less of a sandy slog than it would have been.
Yeah, and
going the other
the
way.
parts that were sandy seemed to be flat to me because there was sand like on those hillsides, but I feel like it was pretty much good footing uphill, and then you'd have a sandy like slope that you were walking along the side. And I think I would pick that over uphill sand.
And as we were heading up from the zigzag, there must be some springs or something in the hillside. So there would be sections of the trail that were just straight up mud, or there were sections of the trail where there were these like little wooden bridges. I don't know why. I guess maybe there's areas once again that erode on the hillside. And we'd be walking along on the wooden bridges, and all of a sudden you just smell this very strong rotting wood smell.
I'm always like, sweet.
And we were like, oh, so I'm guessing that rotting wood smell is what we're standing
underneath me.
And it was a sharp downhill from there. But the bridges did not give out.
So that was good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we made it up to kind of the top of that canyon area, and the views are so amazing into the Zigzag Canyon. You have like this view where obviously a glacier cut into the mountain, and you can see all the way to the mountain in this zigzagging canyon. Molly caught rockfall. Like, she saw a huge rock that just fell all the way down the canyon.
Well,
so loud.
We were standing there kind of at the edge of the canyon, just admiring the view. It's awe-inspiring and beautiful.
So cool.
And at this point, we're
close to the lodge. We're almost done.
Wow, we can take our time and enjoy. And we started hearing this sound of kind of like a rock bouncing, and I scanned, and I saw this rock fall basically from the top of the canyon all the way down into it, careening down. And those are just always interesting things to witness. Like, if a tree falls in a forest, does anyone hear?
If a rock tumbles
and I'm there to
1,000
see
feet
it must have
down.
actually happened. But it's just interesting because those things happen all the time. But it's a glimpse of just how it's a dynamic, changing environment, constantly changing.
Yeah, and I just love that area. Like, I could have stayed there for a really long time, except for that I was hot and I wanted to be done.
Yep.
But it was, that was like a huge payoff for all that uphill. So that was super nice.
Yeah.
And then it was kind of like I said, then it was going to be the sandy section where you're kind of going around the mountain, and it was actually a tiny bit of very marginal downhill and a little uphill.
Yeah.
And we just kind of, we took a few rest breaks, I think, waiting for Kate and Drew because it was hot. But it was just
our final
exciting.
2 miles had 500 feet of gain.
Yeah.
So Obviously, at the end of the day, at the end of your trip, your body's feeling a little tired. You're ready to be done, but it was very doable kind of grade.
And it was fun because then we got back eventually onto a section of trail that we had done before, which I had done in such a demoralized state, right? Very little sleep, having worked all night, 1,000 ants in my kitchen, couldn't go to Tom, Dick, and Harry. Went to Umbrella Falls, but we didn't make it to Umbrella Falls because I can't remember. I think we ran out of time. Fell down on the trail, tore a hole in my shoe. And it was just such a different... also, we were chased by a bee. It was just such a different feel this time where it's like you're finishing this longer track and you've made it around the mountain and it's beautiful and you've conquered literally all the river crossings except for one where you're going to have to step across 2 rocks. Like, I think it's called Little Zigzag River or something, and it is little.
Yeah.
And, I mean, for us, maybe at some time of year it's not, so, do your own research. But anyway, it was just like, it was so funny because we were coming up there, and I think that you and I had sat for a minute because we were like, we're going to finish the final mile together.
Yeah.
So we were sitting in the shade waiting for Kate and Drew, and I put my hand on the ground, and I got this huge thorn in there that I could not get out, and I was like, this part of trail is always trying to kill me. But anyway, it just,
I was going to mention, as we were walking along, we had rejoined with Kate and Drew. Then you start going through the area of like the Timberline
Lodge,
ski area. And so at one point there's where they build the jumps for skiers and snowboarders. The snow is still like 20 feet high and it's August 1st. And I told Kate I was going to run and play in the snow down there. And then I decided that walking an extra like 2/10 of a mile off the trail was not worth it to me at that point. But if you want to, you can even play in the snow. Probably through the entire year. I'm sure it sticks around.
Yeah. So, we made it back to the Timberline Lodge.
And, of course, we encountered the toughest section of the whole trail yet again. The steep asphalt path back down to the lodge.
Yes.
It was painful. So we all just ended up walking on the side of the trail because the asphalt is just too much.
It's the worst.
But you see people who are visitors at the lodge just like relaxing in chairs, reading books, enjoying the mountain.
And so many PCT hikers.
There, which once again, what a cool place to visit in the summer or the winter. But as we were walking down, it's kind of funny because, you're dirty, you're not wearing vacation or clothes, but you still fit in because like half the people there are PCT hikers.
And it was so fun because when we went into the lodge, this lady saw me with like my pack on and I'm dirty and she was like, oh, show me where you've been hiking. And she like led me over to this map and she wanted me to show her because I was like, oh, I went all the way around the mountain. She's like, show me the trail. And there's like a map and I'm showing it to her. And it was just like a fun moment to kind of have that interaction.
Yeah. So we didn't spend a lot of time at the Timberline Lodge. And, if we were really smart, maybe we would have stayed there and eaten our supper. But we were kind of just ready to get on the road and start heading towards home. However, we did just kind of walk through the lodge and see some of the cool kind of historic areas. And I know Kate and Drew thought that was pretty interesting. And then we made our way back to the parking lot, back to the car, which was still there and not damaged or tampered with, which was great.
Yeah, no bear.
And so we're getting our stuff in the car. We're getting ready to leave. And I see this couple, I guess they kind of, they walked past us. And I recognize them because they were the people who were crossing the Co when we were crossing. And they were the ones that like offered a hand and kind of like problem solved how they were going to get across from the opposite side at the same time as us. And I was like, oh, that's actually so cool to see them at the end. And when we saw them at kind of the crux of our hike
and I'm just
the day before.
Interject. We made a lot of friends this way in the past.
Yeah, totally.
So,
Totally. So it's like we've met a lot of people on trail and then connected with them and then we hiked with them and, keep in touch. So I was like, I'm just gonna say hi. So I like started to kind of walk over there and of course they were like changing in like the porta potty or whatever of the parking lot. So I had to like kind of stand there waiting and then one of them came out and I was like, hey, were you guys at the Co yesterday? And they were like, yep. And I was like, okay, bye. So it was a flop.
Yeah, not our closest friends.
Didn't build a new friendship.
Molly tried.
I tried though.
Yeah, but it was fun. We had our little parking lot party, where you're taking off your pack. You're like, we did it. High five. Everybody's alive. And you're finding like the chips you left in the car 3 days ago. You're like, this is the best thing I've ever
Honestly,
eaten.
Though, yes.
You're having your hot car water and you're like, this is so bad. But it was, one of those really fun, successful trips. It was fun because we got to go with our friends, old friends, new friends.
Totally.
And it was just a really good time.
we finally completed the Timberline Trail. It'd been on our list for, I guess, 1 year. It should have been on our list for 5 because it's definitely worth doing as soon as you possibly can. It's a beautiful trail. But we finally had completed it. We'd seen Mount Hood from many aspects and angles, and we had the awesome just pleasure of enjoying it with some friends as well, which it's always fun to do things outdoors with people who you enjoy being around. So it was like, how could it get any better than that?
Yeah. And I honestly loved the way we did it. Counterclockwise was awesome for us. Obviously, some people will like clockwise. That's fine. But I loved our campsites, even the one where our tent almost blew away. In hindsight, I would pitch it somewhere else because based on things I've read after the trail, it seems like it's pretty common for that place to get super windy after sunset. And actually, somebody had to get rescued there because they were trying to winter camp and their tent blew away with all of their stuff inside it. So there are established campsites there that makes it seem like you can camp there, but I feel like probably the only way I would is if I was camping in the wash in my tiny baby tent like Kate.
Or it does seem like being close to the shelter.
You would be fine. More fine.
Yeah, being close to the shelter at Cooper Spur.
And it's an amazing place to be for sunset. So again, I think I would still camp there. I would just select a different campsite with the knowledge I have now.
Exactly. But I guess like a summary statement would just be that once again, the Timberline Trail, having hiked over 1,000 miles, maybe thousands of miles in Oregon, the scenery is just such a great sampler of all kinds of scenery you can see in Oregon.
Alpine, you get forests.
It's well worth your time. And we had someone on social media tell us about how he hikes the Timberline Trail every year. And I think he's done it in like a whole variety of months as well. And I thought, what a cool tradition to do every year as part of this person's like training routine, because the Timberline Trail is so cool that I think I could do it over and over again and never actually be tired of it.
And I also think that it's a trail that you should take seriously, of course. Like any trail, you should assess yourself appropriately. If you've trained well for it, how many days you should take to do it. Always have someone who knows your plans back home if you're going alone, especially. Take river crossing seriously, and take everything with a grain of salt that you hear because your experience is going to be different than everyone else's, which is the beautiful part about hiking and backpacking. If we ever do this trail again, I'm sure we'll have a slightly different experience.
Totally.
And that is just literally reality. And, just assess and get your mind in the right space.
And one of the fun things, once again, I don't know if we would have done the Timberline Trail this last summer if Kate hadn't reached out to us.
I don't think we would have.
Which I'm so glad that she did. And so Kate and her brother Drew, that was their first, kind of major backpacking trip they'd done. And Drew actually liked it so much that he decided to apply for a PCT permit.
And he got it.
Yeah, so we're
so excited for him.
He'll be starting the PCT in April. And we can't wait to figure out or find out how he does. And we're excited to support him as he travels on the PCT.
Yes. And one final tag on. I'm sure there are people out there who are like, why do you guys talk about poop and digging cat holes so much? We don't want to hear about it. I'm sorry if that's you. But one of the big things that kept us from backpacking for a long time, as silly as it sounds, is we didn't know how to poop outdoors. And it's scary. Like, if you're people who didn't grow up just backpacking all the time, it's nerve-wracking to not have anyone know, like, that's going to teach you how to do it, And so I just want people to know, like, sometimes things are going to be hilariously weird when you're out there.
Honestly,
and you can't always follow a video that you see on Instagram of different techniques. And so I just think, like, sorry if we talk about it too much for you. We're probably going to continue. But it's just because it's such a funny aspect of backpacking is it's living your life outdoors. And so you're going to have goofy moments or funny things that happen. So I hope that you can just laugh along and enjoy with us.
And it's so funny because the real barriers for us for truly backpacking, like sleeping outdoors and traveling and covering terrain. Number one, financial, just being able to acquire the gear that we needed. It took us time to do that. Yeah. And number two, pooping outside.
Yeah, so, that was a fear. And I don't know if we would have overcome that fear, except we had a friend who was coming to visit us and we wanted her to go to a place and we knew we were going to have to backpack. Yeah. And so it's just one of those things again where, like, I just want it to be normalized, I guess. Yeah. Pooping outside. I don't know if that's a good thing to say.
In the appropriate
in the appropriate context. Where there's no other place to go. But I just think it's one of those things where it's okay to talk about. So sorry if that ever offends anybody. And my DMs are always open for all the videos of different styles of pooping. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Two Sisters on Adventures podcast, our Timberline Trail series episode. We're so excited because we're planning to start an episode, or actually series, about the Wallowas next week, which is a beautiful area in Eastern Oregon. And so if you're planning to go there, or if you just want to hear some pretty awesome stories about one of our first big years of backpacking, please tune in. Bye.
Bye.